Band of Brothers. When three guys are making the movie, the jokes become so filthy as of lunchtime.
For decades, Tom Hanks has been the face of Hollywood's golden image, the good guy actor, America's most trusted movie star. But now, his own son has shattered that picture-perfect reputation. In a shocking revelation, he claims that behind the charm, behind the smiles, Tom Hanks was involved in deals and decisions that no one ever expected from him. And what he revealed isn't about scripts or box office numbers. It's about the hidden machinery of Hollywood and the price his father was willing to pay to stay on top. Everyone thought Tom Hanks built his empire on talent, kindness, and integrity. That's the story we were sold. But his son's confession tells another tale, one where power, influence, and loyalty weren't always as wholesome as they appeared. It wasn't just the films or the roles that made Hanks untouchable. It was the secret arrangements and whispered deals happening off camera, the kind that could make or break careers in an instant. The world wasn't ready for this revelation. Fans called it betrayal, critics called it fabrication, but for the first time, the illusion of Tom Hanks as Hollywood's untouchable saint cracked wide open. His son didn't just open the curtain, he tore it down, exposing a side of his father that the industry fought to keep buried. And the truth behind it is much darker. Before the world knew him as Hollywood's everyman, Tom Hanks was just another kid from a fractured home in California. Born in 1956, his childhood was anything but stable. His parents divorced when he was only 5 years old, and from that moment on, Tom's life became a revolving door of step-parents, new homes, and endless uncertainty. He moved more than half a dozen times before reaching high school, often left to fend for himself, while his parents tried and failed to piece their own lives together. Those early years carved something deep into Tom. He learned how to be invisible, how to slip into new environments, and how to adapt without complaint. In school, he wasn't the class clown or the star athlete. Instead, he became the quiet observer, the boy who studied people so carefully that he could mimic their mannerisms, their quirks, even their vulnerabilities. This wasn't just childhood curiosity, it was survival, and later, it became the foundation of his acting. But the loneliness was crushing. Tom himself admitted in interviews that he felt like an outsider, drifting through adolescence without a real anchor. His family life offered no comfort. His father was distant, his mother overwhelmed. He once said that he felt utterly alone and painfully shy, qualities that audiences would never imagine in the confident man who would one day captivate the world. This constant instability, however, planted two powerful seeds. First, an intense hunger for connection, to be part of something bigger than himself. And second, an ability to transform, to slip into different skins without losing his core. That's what made Tom Hanks so believable on screen. Whether he was a stranded castaway, a lovesick bachelor, or a soldier facing death, audiences saw a truth in him that came from those raw years of displacement and emotional struggle. It's easy to see the young Hanks as a boy destined for greatness, but it wasn't that simple. His teenage years were marked by awkwardness and isolation. He was far from the polished star he would become. At one point, he described himself as a geek, the kind of kid who would rather watch plays and movies than go to parties. That solitude became his escape, but it also foreshadowed a lifelong battle with the fear of abandonment. So, while Hollywood would later crown him as its most reliable leading man, the truth is that Tom Hanks's unshakable persona was built on shaky ground. The boy who never felt like he belonged would one day play roles that made everyone believe he belonged everywhere. But beneath the success, the scars of his childhood never disappeared. And for his son, those scars may have explained more about the man behind closed doors than the world ever wanted to know. By the late 1972nd, Tom Hanks had discovered the one place where his restless energy and quiet observation could finally take shape: the stage. Theater became his salvation, a place where the boy who once felt invisible could transform into anyone and for a brief moment command the attention he had long craved. He studied drama at Chabot College and later transferred to California State University, where a professor recognized something raw in him, not just talent, but an emotional depth that couldn't be taught. Hanks's first big break came when he landed a role in the low-budget horror film He Knows You're Alone in 1980. The film barely made a ripple, but it was enough to put him on casting directors' radar. Then came Bosom Buddies, a quirky sitcom that required Hanks to dress in drag just to land an apartment. On paper, it was absurd. But what stood out was Hanks's ability to make even the most ridiculous premise feel human and believable. That gift would become his trademark. Throughout the 1982nd, Hanks slowly climbed the ladder. His roles in Splash and Big turned him into a household name. Big, in particular, was a revelation, a comedy that demanded both humor and sincerity. Hanks delivered both effortlessly, earning his first Academy Award nomination and cementing his reputation as Hollywood's everyman. He was relatable, approachable, the actor who felt like a friend. But fame in Hollywood is never as pure as it looks. Behind the smiles and family-friendly charm, Hanks was learning how the industry really worked. Every role, every contract, every handshake came with unspoken rules. Success wasn't just about talent, it was about alliances, politics, and playing the game. Hanks was careful, strategic, and relentlessly driven. He wasn't the naive newcomer anymore. He was a man determined to hold on to the spotlight he had fought so hard to reach. By the 1992nd, Tom Hanks wasn't just famous, he was untouchable. Philadelphia earned him his first Oscar, followed by Forrest Gump, which gave him his second. 2 Academy Awards back-to-back made him Hollywood royalty. Then came Saving Private Ryan, Castaway, The Green Mile, and Toy Story. It wasn't just success, it was dominance. Tom Hanks wasn't simply in movies, he was defining an era of cinema. Yet even at the height of his career, cracks began to show. The pressure to maintain his image as the flawless good guy was immense. Colleagues whispered about how carefully controlled his public persona was, how nothing about Tom Hanks's brand was ever left to chance. He was the actor who could do no wrong, but in Hollywood, that kind of perfection often comes at a cost. And for his son, who grew up watching this meteoric rise from the shadows, the truth was clear. The world saw a hero, but inside the family, the story was very different. The man adored by millions was not always the man he appeared to be. To the public, Tom Hanks was Hollywood's Mr. Integrity, the man whose very name guaranteed decency and trust. But to his son, Chet Hanks, the truth was far less noble. In interviews and unfiltered social media rants, Chet painted a portrait of a father whose spotless reputation was built not just on talent, but on the ruthless mechanics of Hollywood. Chet's words landed like a bomb. "Everyone thinks my dad is this saint. But behind the scenes, it's not what you think." He claimed that Tom's rise wasn't just about hard work, it was about deals, compromises, and a willingness to play Hollywood's hidden game. Chet described growing up in a world where his father was adored by strangers but emotionally distant at home. The same man who could make audiences weep with a monologue struggled to show real warmth within his own family. The public didn't want to believe it, but whispers had circulated in Hollywood for years. Agents, producers, and co-stars quietly acknowledged that Hanks was more calculating than his on-screen persona suggested. He chose roles not just for artistry, but for power. He aligned himself with directors who could elevate his brand, and he forged deals with studios that ensured he stayed indispensable even when others faded away. The darker side wasn't scandal in the tabloid sense, it was the hidden machinery of control, influence, and self-preservation. According to Chet, Tom Hanks wasn't just acting in front of the camera. He was acting in life, crafting an image so flawless that it left little room for truth. "It's like living in a commercial," Chet once said. "Everything's perfect, but none of it's real." But the downfall didn't come in headlines or box office flops. It came in the erosion of trust within his own bloodline. Chet's struggles with addiction, anger, and identity were splashed across the tabloids, and he pointed the finger at the cold, high-pressure environment he grew up in. For him, the dark side of Hollywood wasn't an abstract idea, it was home. For fans, this revelation was more shocking than any affair or financial scandal. It suggested that the man they had idolized for decades wasn't a lie, but a role the greatest performance of Tom Hanks's career. And if that was true, then the cost of that performance was far heavier than anyone imagined. The public image held, but the private cracks had already spread too far. What Chet exposed was not a fall from grace, but the uncomfortable possibility that grace had always been an illusion. The real tragedy of the Hanks family story isn't a sudden collapse or a dramatic scandal splashed across tabloids. It's quieter, more insidious, and in many ways, more devastating. When Chet Hanks finally spoke openly about his father, he wasn't just criticizing Hollywood, he was exposing the emotional wreckage left behind by decades of living under its shadow. Chet described his childhood as one of suffocating pressure and isolation. To the world, he was the privileged son of America's favorite actor. But behind closed doors, he says he felt invisible, expected to play a role in the carefully crafted narrative of the perfect Hollywood family. The more his father shined on screen, the more Chet felt trapped in darkness. His rebellion was inevitable: drugs, violence, reckless behavior. Each headline about Chet's downfall only highlighted the painful contradiction. How could the son of Tom Hanks, the symbol of decency, spiral so far out of control? In Chet's own words, the answer was chilling. I didn't grow up with warmth, I grew up with expectations. Everyone thought I had everything, but what I didn't have was my dad. For millions of fans, it was unthinkable. Tom Hanks, the man who taught the world about love, loyalty, and humanity through his roles, was being painted by his own blood as emotionally absent and consumed by the relentless demands of Hollywood. The climax of this revelation wasn't a scandal that destroyed Tom's career. It was the haunting realization that the very success that made him untouchable also fractured the family that should have been his refuge. The tragedy was not public disgrace, but private alienation. Chet's voice wasn't just an attack, it was a plea for recognition, a desperate attempt to be heard after years of silence. And in that moment, fans were forced to confront an uncomfortable question. If Hollywood's most beloved star couldn't hold his family together, what did that say about the industry or about the price of greatness itself? The curtain had been pulled back. In the end, Tom Hanks remains one of Hollywood's most celebrated icons. His films continue to inspire, his performances still move millions, and his legacy as an actor is secure. But what Chet's revelations have forced the world to confront is the gap between the man on the screen and the father behind closed doors. Colleagues speak of Hanks as a consummate professional, a generous collaborator, and a rare beacon of stability in an industry built on chaos. Yet his son's words remind us that even the brightest stars cast shadows. What the public sees as perfection may, for those closest to him, feel like distance. The truth may never be fully known. Perhaps Tom Hanks is both things at once: the man who gave the world unforgettable characters, and the father whose relentless pursuit of excellence came at a private cost. Maybe the real lesson is that no one, not even Hollywood's most beloved figure, can escape the contradictions of fame. He was more than an actor. He was a man, flawed and fragile like anyone else, trying to navigate a world that rewards illusion more than authenticity. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest tragedy is that we never really knew the person behind the roles, only the performance.